should
Just
do
like that episode,
to Iran exactly what Harry
Reid.
Reid's Bowflex machine did to him a couple months ago. Well, we're not doing that. We've got this guy coming over here and they're chiding. There you go. That's a good look, huh? Harry, read the bottom line. You're a drip. I heard announcers saying that they thought that Netanyahu's speech was dystopic.
Here we go. Nobody blocks.
To me, putting a guy in a cage and lighting him on fire seems a little more dystopic. For God's sake, what's going on? I feel like Charlton Heston waking up in the field and the chimp is on top.
Anthem of Utopia. I have to stop it right here in this case because I'm sure he lost, as he usually does with these stupid words he comes up with in the dictionary. Just use normal language, Dennis. Utopia, the anthem of Utopia is dystopia, which is to say that the characteristics associated with a cataclysmic decline in society. This is if this was unaddressed, could potentially lead to such a dystopia-like condition. Just to give you a sentence, it's a dehumanization. It's a bad thing, but if you don't know what narcotics are, you probably just think he has gas.
For the pony. I guess at this point, I should just be thankful that the Democrats didn't arrest Netanyahu like that Benghazi filmmaker guy. I don't know what's up. All I know is that...
There we go. Fox News, the required Benghazi comment that Dennis has to give at least once a month.
I'm with the Jews in this. I think the other people are crazy. It seems like half our country is wavering on them. No.
Okay, Dennis, now you just say half our country's crazy. Nice of you.
The poll that came out today in Fox News shows quite clearly that Americans now think that the Obama administration is paralyzed and doesn't know what to do to fight terror or stop Iran from doing anything.
Now, this is your typical Bill O'Reilly comment, using words like paralyzed and stupid in the same paragraph.
All right, now let's get to North Korea, one of your favorite countries. I know you've been there like 5 or 6 times, you and Dennis Rodman.
Bill's fascination with Dennis Rodman need not be applied here. It is already well known.
Kim Jong-un, the great leader, is telling his armed forces to ramp up for a war against the USA. How do you think Vegas would handicap that war, Miller?
I don't know. This kid looks sharp to me. He looks like a super good...
Sure he does. He looks sharp. Yeah.
He looks like Kim Jong-un Kardashian to me. Listen,
your typical Kardashian comment, which also is required by Dennis Miller once monthly. Fox News.
Fear North Korea less than I fear the other whack jobs, because at least North Korea are godless men, whereas the other guys are God-driven men. And I think...
Interesting comment there. Definitely kind of agree with that. Dennis, every once in a while you give us a progressive statement. I appreciate that.
We can get at this kid. I think we can sneak somebody a few shekels and get them to go in and do him at night. Get the same guy who pranked him by cutting off his sideburns. Have him sneak in the middle of the night and do the guy. You brought up Rodman. Maybe...
Well, there we go. The interview to Dennis Rodman.
We sent Rodman back over, as I said before, in the wedding dress. He chats the kid up, gets a little flirtatious. The kid marries Rodman. Rodman becomes the first lady in North Korea. And then he, ends up divorcing the kid. The kid's devastated and we get half their money. Maybe that's a play. All I know is I fear these guys in a nuclear war, but not in a ground war. Because I don't know if you've ever seen North Korea's army, but they're like the Rockettes, for God's sake. So
well, there you go. Dennis admitting that North Korea is a threat, nuclear, but making fun of their army. Here again is the Republican war cry. As usual, we can beat these suckers on the ground.
Crazy stuff.
All right.
Yeah, it's like the Christmas show. I think we can do that.
Okay. Boston University, where I matriculated, they have a week called Frisky February. I guess
hello, Bill. A week called Frisky February. Fact checkers anyone?
Could be a month. Frisky
Yeah, thank you, Bill.
4A, where they have health-related related sexual things, and one of them is sex ed at Hogwarts. They're incorporating Harry Potter into this sex ed business. And I don't know if Harry's cooperating or not. What do you think?
I think they're having a good old time at the expense of a movie that's very popular, Bill. You think you make more past that? It's inane and ridiculous.
Well, I think during sex week, a lot of the kids up there matriculate 2-3 times a day, Bill. I'd say it's chronic matriculation. All I know is this: you got to watch yourself when you're in college. You can't be that much of a satyr. I knew a guy in college who was very frisky sexually, and he
Dennis
ended up getting Hogwarts, and they had to perform a wandectomy on him, and those wandectomies are not covered under Obamacare even.
There is your bi-monthly or bi-weekly actual stab at Obamacare, Dennis Miller. Congratulations there, Dennis.
I took a lab once in sexuality through Harry Potter. I had an early morning lab where we studied Lord Cosby, the potion master. And,
that's not nice, Denny.
you know, there's various ways you can go there, but...
Well, you want the low road, thank you.
I think it would be wise for me not to say anything.
No, you want to stay away from that, Billy.
Yeah, I still have my BU.
Just walk away from it. It never happened.
It never happened.
Wandectomy. All right.
You were an apparition, Miller. And we are looking forward.
Well, you are something that starts with A.
To seeing everybody in Rio Rancho, New Mexico for the Don't Be a Pinhead show on Saturday, April 11th. Great time to be in the land of enchantment.
Well, it's too late to be a pinhead. You already watched the show. And that's my Dennis Miller anti-rant. Thank you.
It's Living on Earth. I'm Steve Curwood. A slim paperback novel called The Collapse of Western Civilization, A View from the Future, landed in our office the other day. Its cover art caught our attention. Under a lowering sky, a red desert stretches to the horizon, and a bottle with a message sticks out of the sand. Its authors are two science historians, Naomi Oreskes of Harvard and Eric Conway of Caltech. Their 2010 nonfiction volume, Merchants of Doubt, How a Handful of Scientists Obscured the Truth on Issues from Tobacco Smoke to Global Warming, was a bestseller. This latest book switches to science fiction. It's $23.93. An historian living in the Second People's Republic of China reflects on how science, democracy, and the free market all failed to keep global warming from upending society and nearly driving humans extinct. Naomi Oreskes joins us now. Welcome to Living on Earth.
Thank you.
So why does a historian write fiction?
Well, Eric and I were struggling with some way to convey something important that we felt we had come to understand. People really weren't getting why climate change really mattered. And lots of people had the impression that climate change was something that was just about polar bears. So we wanted to write something that would convey why this is not just an issue about polar bears. This is an issue about us, about our way of life, and also about our institutions, about our economic and political and democratic institutions.
Talk to me a little bit about how you decided what effects of climate disruption that you included in here in your description and how likely those are.
This is a work of fiction because it's imaginary, because it takes place in the future. But everything that happens in the book up until 2013 has actually already happened. So we didn't have to make up any of the parts of the story that take place up until the present. And everything that happens beyond 2013 is based on projecting outward the scientific evidence that already exists. So we already have scientific evidence that hurricanes are possibly becoming more intense. We already have very strong scientific evidence for sea level rise and the destabilization of the Western Antarctic ice sheet. We already have scientific evidence for the role of climate change, things like droughts and crop failure. So we simply took all of the scientific information, both of things that have happened already or things that are very plausibly on the horizon, and then we wove a story around imagining that those things actually happen.
So what you're saying is if you see the boulder rolling down the hill, you don't have to wait to know that it's going to wind up someplace towards the bottom.
Exactly. That's exactly right. And we also wanted to say that, although we don't want to disparage the work that we ourselves have done, it didn't take a lot of imagination to imagine what would happen when that boulder hit the bottom, especially if there were a town sitting at the bottom of the hill.
One of the key parts of your novel is the notion that democracy fails and fails miserably. Why did you pick that theme?
Well, this really fell out from our book, Merchants of Doubt. So in Merchants of Doubt, we told the story about a group of men who fought the scientific evidence of climate change because they were afraid of its implications. That is to say, would lead to the undermining of democratic systems and become a kind of invitation for authoritarian governments to take control of the marketplace, of the relocation of people, and other things like that. And so we felt that the profound irony of the story was that by denying the reality, they actually increased the likelihood that disruptive climate change would lead to the very outcomes that they most dreaded.
So the one civilization that comes out comparatively well in your novel is China. Now, of course, China is, in some respects, the oldest civilization on the planet, continuously operating for the last 5,000 or so years. But why did you pick China?
Well, there were two reasons. The first is the one you suggested, that China is the oldest continuously existing civilization on Earth. So just from a simple, logical, practical point of view, it seemed most plausible that China would continue even if other civilizations did not. But we also wanted to bring out this ironic point that if things really start to go bad, it's going to be the authoritarian countries that are more in a position to take control of the economy and relocate people, deal with food shortages and food riots. So we wanted to bring out that point that if you really care about democracy, you ought to be doing everything in your power to stop climate change, because disruptive climate change will not be friendly to liberal democracies.
What of what China is doing today supports your thesis here?
Well, China is very complicated, and lots of people like to bash China because there's this, huge pollution problem in China and just amazing emissions increases in the last 10 years that very few people anticipated. So it's very easy to look at China and to blame them and to say, well, why should we take action on climate change when their emissions growths are so rapid? But at the same time, China has actually made massive investments in solar energy, in fourth-generation nuclear power. There's a lot of talk in China about a carbon tax. So China is this complicated country where both good and bad things are happening at the same time. So in the optimistic scenario, the good side of what's happening in China, the carbon tax, the massive investment in solar power, those would be the points that prevail. We don't really take a position on whether that's what happens. We simply speculate that the authoritarian aspects of Chinese culture become resurgent again, and those aspects then come to the fore as China remobilizes and moves hundreds of millions of people to higher, safer ground.
Part of your book is really tough on the scientific method, the drive for scientists to be absolutely sure that something is right. Why do you talk about that?
Well, one of the issues that's come up a lot in the last few years surrounding the whole issue of climate change is the question of scientific communication. And a lot of scientists have thought that this was simply a problem of people not really understanding the science. And Eric Conway and I have argued that that's not really true, that a lot of the resistance to climate change has to do with the political and economic issues that are at stake. But there is one element of it we think that is about scientists and scientific communication, and that's the fact that scientists hold themselves to an extremely high bar before they're willing to say that they know something is true. So an example that many people have heard about has to do with hurricanes. We have tremendous amounts of evidence that extreme weather events are getting more extreme. And we know that when the ocean warms up, you have more energy to drive hurricanes. So there's lots of good reasons to link climate change to hurricanes and to say that as the world warms, we expect hurricanes to become either more frequent or more intense. And yet the scientific community has been reluctant to make that link because it hasn't hit this high level of confidence, which is the so-called 95% confidence limit. So by setting the standard so extremely high, scientists sort of protect themselves against a certain kind of error, the error of thinking something's true that maybe isn't, but they put all of us at risk to a different kind of error, which is the error of doing nothing, the error of thinking we're not sure about something that's actually taking place.
So what you're saying is that science doesn't much like the precautionary principle, doesn't much like the majority of evidence, wants the overwhelming amount of evidence.
Yeah, I don't really like to talk about the precautionary principle in terms of climate change because we're way past the point of precaution. Precaution would have been doing something about this 20 years ago. I guess the way I like to think about it is there's two metaphors